of published books of 23 and many awards including Sahitya Akademi Award. No. Okay. Sorry. And we have 3 scholars. May I request at first Professor Sanjukta Das Gupta to speak in the beginning, and after that we will invite one by one our other scholars.
Is it have a copy of the program?
Hello everyone, good afternoon, respected Vice President of Sahitya Akademi, and of course Ji. This G I have picked up from Delhi, from my frequent visits, and Rao Ji, and all other dignitaries, and congratulations to all the awardees who were the winners of the award. And were present at the award giving ceremony yesterday. I could not be present because I had to attend another event, but it's really a great honor to be here this afternoon and also learn from practicing literators who write children's literature. In fact, you know, when I was a kid, I used to often wonder, why do such senior people write for children? Why don't children write for children? But then, now with age and some sagacity, I suppose, when sometimes I deviate into sense, I think that romanticism doesn't work, because children have to learn, and who could be the best teachers other than literatures? That is because we are not, when we think in terms of children's literature, we are not thinking of a single genre. We are thinking of poetry, we are thinking of drama, we are thinking of fables, we are thinking of folk tales, and of course, as has been cited by the Secretary, even the epics. In fact, most of us, now it's a different story post-globalization. That is, from the 21st century, things have changed, and Madhav Kaushik ji has already referred to this fact that everybody seems to be very learning English and imbibing a sort of cultural new imperialism. But up to that period, I think, all of us, the first stories we heard were from the Panchatantra, from the Ramayana, from the Mahabharata. But again, the way in which we are even looking at children and thinking in terms of a curriculum for children, nowadays Shakespeare is not much encouraged in the country where Shakespeare was born. For students who may read Shakespeare at the school level at one time, everybody read Shakespeare. Nowadays, Shakespeare is looked upon as a very violent dramatist. So you learn about killing and murdering when you are in class 6 or 7. Julius Caesar gets murdered by all his friends. Othello goes and kills his wife. Hamlet wonders how many he can kill but can't decide. So all this has led to a feeling that those epics and myths and folk tales have somehow been deconstructed in the present times. And so, as again Madhav Kaushik ji said, that we have to reinvent and we have to focus in a different way in writing modern and postmodern children's literature. And as is also evident that various regions with its various customs, its various ways, not only in terms of its linguistic culture, but in terms of all the other customs which are associated with a particular state. In India, this is such a rich culture that we have. 24 languages, but we have more states than that. We have many union territories. We can't really decide on how many we want, but nevertheless, it is the fact that there are 24 languages recognized by the Sahitya Akademi and prizes were awarded. But there are many other languages also, and I'm sure children's literature is being written in these languages as well. So again, when we use a term like children's literature, who are these children? Children have to be divided into age groups. The ones who are from, say, the age of 1 to 5, 5 to 10 or 11, and then comes the adolescent. In Bangla we call them the paka precocious kids. Very problematic to engage them. So those, for the pakas we have different stories. And there again, as Shubhut Sarkar reminded us, Sunil Gangopadhyay was such an attractive writer of children's stories. I remember my son, who was in a school where you don't much read Bangla stories. It's a school called Lamatinia. So, but he read Joladoshu of Sunil Gangopadhyay, and he wanted to, at the age of 12, he wanted to translate it into English so that he could share it with his other friends. Because the other friends are from other parts of the country. There are Marwari kids, there are Rajasthani kids, there are Bihari kids. So their home language is different. And as a result, he couldn't share a Bangla book with his friends. And therefore, again, another corollary with children's literature is the necessity of translation. And Sahitya Akademi also plays a huge role in not only recognizing regional languages, but encouraging translation. I do not know of any other publishing unit in the whole of India which takes such an interest, such an engagement, not a perfunctory book which becomes a bestseller and immediately it has to be translated into various languages. It is a sustained effort going on through years and years, and this is the special contribution of Sahitya Akademi which brings us here today. And because Madhav Kaushik ji also concluded his presentation, I'm with a little poem of his. I'm a little also, I don't know, I have to be very humble, but I just want to share a poem of mine, which incidentally was published in the Statesman this morning, and you have to tell me whether it is a poem for children. Its title is Some Are More Equal. The buffaloes were frustrated and glum. These privileged cows were having so much fun. The grumpy goats looked like dazed toads. The chicken were totally confused. They felt they were so ruthlessly abused. Mutilated, mashed, sliced and minced, none seemed to care or flinch or wince. These human animals are such cold-blooded liars. As they gobble us, they chant, "I love chicken, I love chicken." The offended fish joined the irate chicken. "I love fish," they rant, gobbling, currying and frying us, ruthless, treacherous hypocrites. The weaker we are, the more they mistreat. Whenever they mess up, this is what they sing. "We shall overcome someday," they shout like kings. The nerdy monkey said, "We know we can't overcome, nor can they, weaklings all, hopeless and dumb." "Who are they?" asked the innocent fox. Smiling knowingly, said the wise ox, "Mankind, the unkindest species of all." The philosophic stray dog said with a sigh, "No point, all this chatter about evolution. Cyclical evolution is about devaluation." The sleepy tiger whispered, "I love to dream of revolution." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sanjukta Das Gupta ji. Now may I request Ms. Dipanvita Roy, who belongs to the new generation of 21st century writers in Bengali, writing mostly for children in a postmodern world. Till date, Dipanvita has 50 titles to her credit. Some English translations of her work published by the NVT have been included in the curriculum of CBSE schools. Dipanvita has been awarded the Upendra Kishore Puraskar 2017 by the Sahitya Akademi Government of West Bengal for her contribution to children's literature in Bengal, and some other Puraskar also. She is working as a senior producer at the Bengali channel ABVP Ananda. Ms. Dipanvita Roy.
Distinguished guests, dignitaries from the Academy, ladies and gentlemen in the audience. I wish all of you a very good afternoon. At the outset, I wish to thank you for sparing your time for this event and also to convey my thanks to the Sahitya Akademi authorities for giving me this excellent opportunity of sharing my thoughts, my experience as a writer with such an august gathering on a topic that is closest to my heart: children's literature. As a writer in the Bengali language, I will speak about children's literature in Bengali, starting with a curious aspect of such literature that lends it a unique character. In my view, the lack of clear line of demarcation between writing for children and writing for the adolescents or the young adults is the curious aspect of children's literature in Bengali that marks it different from literature of other parts of the world, particularly the Western world. As I have written predominantly for the children, I will draw from my own experience for elaborating this point. I will then narrate how I started writing for children despite an exacting work life in the television industry, what my motivations were, my discovery of the legacy of children's literature in Bengali since its inception, and how my writings and outlook have been shaped by this unique legacy. Why do I write children's stories? What do I write for the children? These questions inevitably come to mind as I reflect on my journey for the past 10 years since I discovered the passion for writing for children. What began as bit to touch little hearts soon grew into an irresistible urge for understanding and expressing the emerging world of children growing up. The tales describing the sights and sounds of the world around small kids in the backyards seamlessly slid into fantasies, adventures, and mysteries, stirring the imagination and spirit of inquiry in young minds. To me, writing for the children is like a bubbling stream of joyous expression, flowing into a wide, deep, yet placid river, a river that signifies the realm of Bengali literature. Speaking of children's literature in Bengali, it must be said that it is quite unique, being resplendent with works of stalwarts of adult Bengali literature. From Rabindranath Tagore to Sharatchandra Chattopadhyay, from Tarashankar, Bibhuti Bhushan and Ashapurna Devi to Mahashweta Devi, from Shivram Chakraborty to Premendra Mitra, from Sunil Ganguly to Shushyendu Mukhopadhyay, writers of all epochs and genres have written extensively for children and left their mark. This may be because of an old and enduring maxim among Bengali literary circles. According to this maxim, unless one writes successfully for children, one cannot be said to have achieved distinction as a writer. The saying goes that until you have created good stories for the children, your pen has not become pure. Kolom shuddha hoy na. As a writer, you are still incomplete, regardless of whatever accolades you may have received by writing for adults. It follows, therefore, that any writer in Bengali who aspires for greatness must write for children. This tradition continues to this day. It may be so that being immersed in the world of adults, which is with its complexities, its shades of darkness and light, its mixture of truth and falsehood, in short, a world of grey that leaves the writer tired. A touch of innocence, colour, hope and fun that mark the world of children brings a welcome break. It spurs the writer to dwell on the world of children. In so doing, writers have always brought consciously or unconsciously elements from the adult world which they felt would be compatible to children's sensibilities. This is why Bengali literature does not have a dominant history of a separate set of writers for children literature from that of young adults. This is, in my view, is the first reason for the lack of clear line of demarcation between literature for children and young adults. Another reason for the lack of boundary seems to lie in the demands of time. As literature is considered to be the mirror of society, the writings for the children have always tried to shape young minds so that they evolve to fulfill society's need. In colonial time, the British colonial bureaucracy actively carried out racial profiling for employment. Bengalis were destined to be clerks in the administration, while certain North Indian communities like the Rajputs, Jats, hill tribes, etc. were the martial races fit for the colonial army. When the flames of nationalism spread among Bengalis, the idea was to shake young people out of their comfort zones in white-collar employment and make them aspire for more adventurous lives as a precondition for evolving into soldiers for national liberation. After independence, the focus was on nation building amidst trials and tribulations brought on by partition. The stories by Shaktipada Rajguru, Bonoful and others highlighted qualities of personal integrity, sacrifice, commitment to hard work and a rejection of age-old vices of casteism, superstition, obscurantism as India embarked on her tryst with destiny, trying to build a modern, progressive and enlightened society. The bubbling spring of child fantasy flowed into the gurgling river of patriotic optimism in the young adult. During the early stages, Bengali children literature was influenced by Western, particularly English literature, as the early writers were themselves products of Western education. While the early works drew ideas from the stories and folk tales from the Western world, the authors were remarkably adept in casting them in native mold, creating a Bengalification of themes so as to touch the little minds and hearts. A break with Western influence came with the discovery of Bengali folklore in the early part of the 20th century. The pioneering work of Dakshinaranjan Mitra Majumdar, who scored the length and breadth of undivided Bengal to collect folk tales from villages and small towns, led to the publication of the first collection of Bengali folk tales titled Thakumar Jhuli. The year was 1907. It was a path-breaking work by Dakshinaranjan, and Rabindranath Tagore, writing the preface of the Thakumar Jhuli, acknowledged this. For a long time, Thakumar Jhuli was the chief attraction in the genre of Bengali folklore, and we, in our generation, grew up mostly on it. Soon after its emergence, children's literature became a very rich and important part of Bengali literature. This is also because magazines like Mukul, Shakhao Shathi, Sandesh or Mouchak had all along provided opportunity to budding as well as eminent writers to try their hands at children's literature. In due course, there were numerous children's magazines in circulation. The tradition continued for 70 to 75 years. In those times, entertainment among children was confined to books and sports. So most middle-class homes subscribed to some children's magazine or the other to keep their children happy. Eminent writers like Leela Majumdar, Shivram Chakraborty, Shapon Buro or Ashapurna Devi used to write regularly in these magazines. The world of children literature swelled in munificence. Then sometimes from the early 80s onward, the tide began to turn. The 80s of the last century heralded the age of consumerism in Bengali society. As a result, television entered each and every household. The attraction of visual entertainment weaned away both the young and the old from books. The practice of gifting books to children at birthday parties became uncool and much looked down upon. As the children turned away from books, the number of magazines catering to them started to fall. In the last 2 decades of the 20th century, several of these magazines had shut shop, and the band of writers writing mostly for children had all but disappeared. The bubbling stream was dying and was reduced to a trickle by the turn of the century. Yet, at this juncture, there appeared a glimmer of hope, a proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. At the turn of the millennium, from the early 2000s, there emerged a bunch of new writers in the world of Bengali children literature. Most of them were in the age group of 30 to 40. Being younger than most established writers, they could connect with the children better. Being aware of the current trends, they also started introducing new and emerging topics of interest in their writings, attracting the attention of young minds. Even then, there was little difference between offering for children and young adults. But no doubt, the scale was titled more in favor of writing for adolescents. My own journey as a writer for children also began at the same time. I love to write fairy tales and have gained some recognition for them. I seek to make a contribution to strengthening the rich legacy of folk literature in Bengali by breaking a new path, more attuned to contemporary life, yet retaining the appeal of fantasy. From the pioneering work of Dakshinaranjan to later works, Bengali folklore remained for a very long time a modified or brushed up rendition of the age-old stories and tales. For long, there was no school of writers of original tales. By original, I mean stories that retain the style and imagery of folklore but introduce new ideas, elements and ethos more relevant to modern times. Finally, Shoilian Ghosh appeared on the scene with his array of original writings which create magic enough to attract the children. Still later, Navanita Devshen created some original fairy tales. Notwithstanding these developments of Bengali fairy tales, folklore was drying up in the same way as Bengali children literature as a whole in the last 2 decades of the previous century. A notion had become prevalent by that time that the age of computers and internet had left no space for imagination, as everything was available or determinable at the click of a mouse. When I started writing for children, I did not completely buy the idea that the children are no longer interested in fairy tales. I felt that the reason why children today are less excited by traditional folklore than us because they cannot relate the characters or the backdrop with the reality in their everyday lives. For instance, if the children do ask why a king should have 7 wives or why should the Duorani be the only one to keep suffering, it is not easy to come up with answers. Another reason why I decided to write original fairy tales of a new variety is that traditional folk tales are steeped in medieval values which do, to my mind, have little relevance in today's world. For instance, a common trait that besets traditional folklore is gender bias, particularly patriarchy, which unfortunately remains a dominant trait in society to this day, was practically unchallenged in the medieval time. Therefore, traditional folklore say that the royal sceptre is only for the prince. Girls have no right to the throne. Royal damsels are always waiting to be rescued, but it is the prince who wins the day with his valor and wit. The women have subservient roles in most stories. When they assume important roles, they are only negative ones. When a beautiful queen challenges the right of primogeniture to promote her offspring over an older half-brother or half-sister, she has to be a witch. As would any woman who dared challenge the code of patriarchy. Joan of Arc was burnt at the stake as a witch, not so much for being a dangerous enemy or a heretic. As a responsible citizen, I feel it my duty to cultivate ideas of gender equality and gender sensitivity in young minds. In my first book on fairy tales, I have brought characters of kings, queens, prince and princess as in traditional lore. But my king does not worry about not having a son and is quite happy to choose his successor from among his 3 daughters. I have also chosen to depart from dwelling in traditional folklore because of the endemic violence in its pages. The wicked queen is impaled by iron stakes, one driven through her back and another through her chest. The demons are killed by cutting off their arms and legs. I believe that such violence should not intrude into the children's world of fantasy. The world is becoming more violent these days, with global conflicts and wars frequently spilling into civilian lives. Killing and maiming innocents, children need to be shielded from violence, not exposed to more of it. When the traditional folk tales were conceived, violent retribution for malicious act was the norm. Public execution and torture were accepted as justice, and children listening to these stories by the fireside had the comforting presence of their grandparents, siblings and cousins in the joint or extended families to soothe their nerves. Children today have little company and are on their own for most of their time. They are often alienated and are therefore more vulnerable to adverse impact of violence in their surroundings. While there is no escape from breaking news and social media, we, the writers, can offer some solace by painting a softer world in our works. The idea is to stimulate the child's imagination and instill her finer sensibilities. The idea is to savor the joys of life and never forgo hope. My stories tell about the wicked and also punishment, but the punishment is not to cause pain or harm to the person to be punished, but such that is meant to provoke repentance and an urge to reform. Apart from deviating from traditional folklore in themes, mores and values, I have tried consciously to introduce new elements and topics relevant to contemporary society. I bring into my stories subjects and topics of prime importance in modern times and about which the children should be made aware. Let me cite an example. In one of my stories, a small village girl becomes a showy, that is bosom friend, to a small river flowing by her village. She chats with the river, plays in its waters, and has a good time in its company. One day the king orders a dam to be constructed, and when it comes up, the poor river gets diverted from its course by the side of the village, chokes gradually, and finally dries up. The girl is overcome with sorrow and at the loss of her friend. Many years later, when the village girl has grown old and become grandmother, her grandson breaks the dam and brings the river back to the village. The old friends meet again. The story named Kajullata Shoi is a call to children to bond with nature and be aware of protecting the environment. The world of books can start the imagination in a child's mind with the appropriate magic words and creative illustration. So the more we can stimulate children's imagination, create fantasies easy for them to relate with, the more can we attract children to books. We must create a kaleidoscope with the handle in the children's hand so they may turn it and see images and colors change. Since it is all about creating magic with words, the language used is important. Sentence must be short and contents brief, as the children like it simple and cannot focus for a great length of time. If this can be said to be a formula, I strictly adhere to it. To sum up, I will say that with 21st century bringing disruption, uncertainty and chaos with rapid changes in technology, the economy and people's way of life, it is easy to become disoriented and alienated. Children are no exception. Amidst the scenario, a new generation of writers has emerged of whom I considered myself to be a part. These writers are trying to make sense of these changes and help children find their bearings in this changing world. The writers may have different ideas about the changing social environment, but they are all united in a common endeavor to accept new forms, motifs and orientation to reflect their views on the current and the emerging realities. My own conviction is to go about this work by avoiding pictures of violence, misogyny or gender inequality that is so prevalent around us. Be they fairy tales, mystery or adventure, my stories will convey a sense of connecting with the community, nature and family in an environment upholding equality of opportunity, gender sensitivity and the dignity of work. It is my way of imagining a brighter world for the children and definitely for all of us. So what does the bubbling stream mean to the deep yet placid river? How will the future of the children's literature affect the fortunes of Bengali literature as a whole? It is difficult to say without an extensive research. But this much can be said: unless the bubbling stream conjures a world of dreams to attract the children today, there will be fewer adults tomorrow willing to take a dip into the deep meandering river of Bengali literature. If this indeed happens, Bengalis as a culture will contribute less to the people of the world. We have to make the stream more lively and bubbly. It is now a choice between succumbing to global pressure and rediscovering ourselves despite such pressure. It is a choice between forgetting our language and bringing it to the forefront of the world's attention. As a Bengali, I must say that there is no choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dipal Mehta ji. Now may I request Dr. Madhurima Vidyarthi. In her day job, Madhurima Vidyarthi is an endocrinologist trained in Kolkata and London and a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians, UK. She has always been a passionately committed writer. Over the years, she has written in many formats: articles for the Statesman, scripts for educational documentaries, and for a CD-ROM created by PricewaterhouseCoopers on Satyajit Ray, narrated by Sir Richard Attenborough. But her enduring love has always been fiction. Her first book, My Grandmother's Masterpiece, has just been published by Duckbill, Penguin Random House India in February 2022. It is a chapter book for younger readers. Dr. Madhurima Vidyarthi.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and it's it's indeed an honor to be here, and thank you all for inviting me. Thank you to the Sahitya Akademi, to all its dignitaries, to all the very esteemed writers who are here. I am at the beginning of my publishing journey, so I feel very humble, but very grateful indeed. I have been asked to speak on writing for children in India in English, and I must say it's a very daunting task, mainly because we do not own English in the way that we own our regional languages. English is mainly something we learn, speak, practice in school, in the workplace. But at home we are speaking one, sometimes two, sometimes even three languages. And that is the heritage, that is the legacy, the culture that we grow up with. When we were growing up, there was not the sort of the plethora of children's books in English that we have today. Obviously the Children's Book Trust and the National Book Trust did a brilliant job, and I still have my very first indigenous English book, if I may say so. It was called A Pinch of Salt, Rocks an Empire, and it was one of the first books I read that had been actually written by an Indian writer, because otherwise we were being brought up on a very healthy prescribed diet of foreign writers in English, which was to be expected, I think, at that time. There were some magazines, of course. There was Tinkle and Champak and Chanda Mama, which in their English versions, and obviously I think given everybody in this auditorium will agree that compared to the rich historical legacy of regional language literature, regional language writing for children, English language writing has a slightly well, a less glorious or a briefer history, which will hopefully burgeon and come into its own. Other than the sort of the giants of publishing, we're looking at stellar work being done by publishers like Eklavya, Katha, Pratham Books, Storyweaver.org, all of them. So, and obviously there is still Amar Chitra Katha, still the Kara Details, all of that. I started writing in English after I realized that there was, I think, a need for English to be written with Indian sensibilities, not simply either as a translation from the regional languages. I mean, I grew up with Hindi and Bangla. I read equally in both, right up to a fairly advanced level, I would like to think. But I realized that there are certain sensibilities, certain idioms which belong very purely to India and which cannot be transliterated into English, in toto. So it has to be an Indian writing for Indian children about Indian themes without feeling perhaps like a second-class citizen to established English writers. This feeling about the language was consolidated further when I went to England, to London, for further training in medicine, not for further training in any sort of language or literature. That was in 2004, and I realized that the English we were learning in India had stayed at 1947 standards. We were still being quoted Red and Martin, we were still being held to very high standards of grammar, of syntax, and very, very sort of precise language, which in itself is not a bad thing for any language. However, English in England had moved on. And English in England in 2004 was very different to the English that we wrote, we spoke, we tried to communicate with. It was as if we were the ones in the time warp. So I came back after about 10 years in England, and I realized that we need to have our own literature in English, and a lot of these publishers were now doing this. A lot of writers, my fellow writers, were doing this wonderful, wonderful work. And I think we needed to break this mold, which sort of dictated that every bit of a children's book in English had to be in English. So every time you said, I don't know, Rasmalai or Rasgulla, you then had to have brackets or little footnotes explaining that these were cottage cheese balls doused in syrup or whatever. Or if you wanted to talk about Noyantara, you had to sort of say periwinkle and things like that. You didn't. I was writing for an audience, or we were writing for an audience who knew what this was, who knew that if you said Motichur Laddu, who knew what besan was, who knew what, whatever Diwali or Holi or Onam was. You didn't have to dumb it down to say Harvest Festival or Festival of Lights or whatever. So I have brought along my first book because it sort of extends from the last session of what we were talking. It's called My Grandmother's Masterpiece. Please don't think this is self-advertisement, but I want to read just two bits which show that I have actually tried to put in a very Indian context in an English language book. The first line: this is the story of how my grandmother became a famous artist. So this is the story of a 70-year-old grandmother who suddenly rediscovers her love for art, and she faces lots and lots of obstacles while she is trying to rediscover her love for art, not to turn it to commercial purposes, but just to find pleasure in a long forgotten hobby. And there is a bit where the grandfather is actually saying that, what will you do with painting and drawing at your age? So I'll just like to, with your permission, read a little bit of the story. So there is a section where the grandmother has drawn on the car seat. The story is narrated by the granddaughter. And she says, but I wanted to paint on the car seat too, so the next day I filled in the beaks. with my red crayons. Ma didn't say anything, perhaps she didn't notice. Mad, said Dada when I told him, and Dada here is the grandfather. Who draws on a car seat? What is it to you? Demanded Minima, and Minima is the grandmother here. I'll draw wherever I like. You are drawing wherever you like, aren't you? Look at this rubbish. Why can't you be your age? Is this the time to play holy with colors and waste money on scribbles? Have you ever earned a single rupee in life that you are wasting it so freely now? Minima was painting a beach on a small square canvas. She frowned at the phone before replying to Dada. Why should I earn money? It's my son's money I'm spending, not yours. And what else do you want me to do all day? Housework, like a servant. You don't want to do housework, that's fine. Why should I want to do housework at my age? We have 3 servants. Haven't I done enough housework all my life? So, this is the sort of conversation that may not be deemed very appropriate for a young child. This book is supposed to be for 8 to 11-year-olds. But this is the sort of attitude that I thought would be appropriate to discuss in a book about a grandmother, especially somebody who is committing an unforgivable sin because she is neglecting home and hearth and family to rediscover a lost passion. So that is the sort of, I think, issues that we are trying to bring up. Another book that will hopefully be published next year is talking about elderly, disabled people and the challenges they face and the challenges their caregivers face, also written for children. And I would like to just conclude with a real life incident which shows how deeply children can think. And I think all of us who work with children, write for children, know that they're actually very intelligent. This is when my son was about 2 years old and I was coming home with him. It was getting dark and he was getting frightened, and then I said to him, and I'm sort of quoting verbatim because we use a mix of languages at home. So I said, "Dekho beta, raste ki light jal rahi hai." And he looked at me, he looked up and he said, "Asman ki light kab jalegi?" So whenever we write for children, whenever we work with children, I think we have to be very, very careful in how and in what way we reach out to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madhurima ji. Friends, now may I request Dr. Patipakka Mohan ji, who is a poet, writer, critic, translator, anchor and children writer, and has pioneered to organize creative writing workshops for children and children's writers. He has written 12 books and compiled 24 books in children literature and translated 30 books for children into Telugu. He has also written 11 books in various genres like poetry, criticism, short story, long poem, literary history, and compiled and edited 19 books. He also worked as editor for Telangana State Government Telugu textbooks for classes 2 to 5. His writings included in Maharashtra and other textbooks for class 2 and class 3. Mohan won first Andhra Pradesh State Youth Award in Literature, Bal Sahitya Bal Sahitya Puraskar, Telangana Saraswat Parishad, Dr. Tirumala Srinivas Charya Puraskar, and other 20 awards confirmed in the field of children literature and others. His collection of songs for children, long poem on weavers, suicides, and Nanilu are extremely popular. Dr. Patipakka Mohanji.
Sabhaku Namaskaram. Greetings to the Bal Sahitya, lit up like a flower garden in vivid colors with many Indian languages. Namaskaram to Professor Samyukta Gupta Garu. Let me offer my sincere thanks to fellow speakers Deepa Rai, Dr. Madhurima Vidyarthi, Balram sir, and Madhav Kaushik ji, who introduced the children literature of various Indian languages so far, because this platform had provided me a terrific opportunity to gain experience about children literature in Indian languages. Namaskaram by name to everyone sitting in the hall. I will try to introduce a body view of children literature in Telugu with a literary background of 2000 years and has been recognized as ancient language by Government of India and called as the Italian of the East by foreigners and hailed by Vishwakavi Rabindranath Tagore as sweet language during his tour to Pithapuram on 19th October in 1918. Children literature in Telugu has an enormous history as so great as the Telugu language itself. Although epic writing in Telugu commenced 1500 years back, traditional children folk literature existed even before that. It originated in the form of paternal and maternal grandmothers, grandfathers and aunts and was inherited from generation to generation. For thousands of kids, folk song, play songs, songs of festival of colors, festival songs, wedding songs, Batakama song, the festival of flowers, school, temple, etc. emerged from the voices of mothers on countless occasions. It is in that category probably mother started to sing to her beloved child, Lali Bangaru Gumma, Lali Muddura Gumma, still prevails even now. I hear such songs in my childhood even now. My mother sings them for my kids also. Let me sing one or two lines, Telugu kid songs my mother used to sing when I was child to share you the sweetness and melody of the Telugu language. Jo Achyutananda Jo Jo Mukunda Rame Paramananda Rama Govinda Jo Jo Edavaku Enni Mayanna Ediste Nee Kallu Neelalu Garite Ne Chudalenu Palaina Garave Bangaru Kallu Dayadaya Pitta Dayagalla Pitta Atlatra Voeti Vorama Chiluka. Perhaps these songs need no translation. The rhythm, sweetness and melody in them are beyond words and meaning. Words like a mantra for the children. All are inherited from one generation to another vocally. Mothers, both grandmothers and aunts used to sing them. I think Rausa's mother also used to sing these songs only. In Telugu, Vemana Shatakam, Sumati Shatakam, Bhaskara Shatakam and Jataka tales were available among the early children literature. For while Bharata, Bhagavata and Ramayana etc. filled the gap, it was at this time the cultural renaissance began in the first half of 19th century throughout the country, as influencing many fields. It affected Telugu area also. Children's literature is one among them. With the influence of British education policy, English and other languages introduced Western kids literature in Telugu also. In a way, we can say this influence attributed to the entry of modern children literature in Telugu language as well. It is only the modern era that the most thoughtful steps towards children literature have commenced. The main object of modern children literature to import knowledge, entertainment, mental pleasure, cheerfulness and enthusiasm to children. The Panchatantra and other ancient Indian traditional work says children literature should focus on transforming children into civilized culture and teaching them what they will need to grow as the good citizens. There is a verse in the Panchatantra, Yennane Bhajane Lagnaha Samskarona Nadhayaved Kadhacharena Balanam Nitistadavita Kadyate. This means the color observes well to a new part. The color applied to it is not wasted. In the same way, the stories teach morals to children. The Panchatantra says that many Telugu veterans interested in the modern ideas, education system, introduced modern ideas, education system, etc., started creating literature in children. The first generation among them are Gajjala Ramanujan Naidu, Kandukuri Veeraselingam Pantulu, Gurujara Venkatapparao Pantulu, and Venkata Parvateshwara poets, Vedepelli brothers, Chakrapani, Janamanchi, Kesaba, etc., created children literature earlier to 1947. Their efforts are the background support to strong basis in beginning children literature in modern children literature in Telugu literature. In addition to these, at the same time, many translations published by Raduga and Pragati publishing houses in Russia become close to Telugu people. Vishwakavi Rabindranath Tagore directly introduced it to Telugu children through Faluda and Kabuliwala, Garvapasi, etc. Premendra Mitra, Ganada Adventures and Chitragiri were available in Telugu in 1940s time only. This creation continued around post-independence era at a remarkable level. About the mentioned list of people above, other had written children for another 4 or 5 decades. Henceforth, Nyayapati Raghavarao, Nyayapati Kameshwari, Dr. Dasharathy, Utpal Satyanarayana, Nalam Krishnarao, abundant theatre against casteism and organized communal meals for all castes, preached the same perspective in children literature also. Nalam Krishnarao had penned many works, highlighted social injustice and promoted noble attitude and humanity. Before talking about flourish of the post-independence silver jubilee era, one thing should be mentioned. Although children's literature appeared in Telugu around 1800, most of it was published by the government for textbooks, for mostly as metrical Shataka poems. Pedda Bala Siksha published in 1847. Then after a century, Maganti Babinidu brought Telugu Talli, and Qasim Khan Bala Vijnana Sarvaswam came into light. But before 1945, some thoughtful poets had penned children lyrics in Telugu for kids. In 1912, Venkata Parvatishwara poets had written Balagayalu. In 1916, B.V. Rangayya, Baliga Bhushanam, Andhra Padalu, and by Tekuvala Achyutaramarao in 1924. And Balabandhu, Gidugu Sidapati wrote for children Railu Bandi Pata, Iga Pata, and Chilikammapelli, which entered the textbook at that time. Children used to sing them very fondly. Chinta Dikshatuli is one among the writers who recognized the mentality of Telugu children and wrote for them Lakkapiditalu song collection, a good example, especially the song Hanumantini Toka, a wonderful way to explain the Ramayana to children in an excellent one. Not only poets and writers, but the role of magazines was also important in promotion and enrichment of Telugu children literature at that time. Janavinodini, published from Madras in 1884, contributed a lot to the promotion and development of children literature. They used to publish games, ancient times, magazines like Grihalakshmi and Bharati also published and provided children literature. In 1945, Bala a special magazine for children started. This created a great trend dynamism in Telugu children literature. Chandamama started in Telugu after Bala. It's not to exaggeration to say no Indian exists without being familiar to Chandamama, that was first started in Telugu in 1946. It started in Telugu and was later published in 13 Indian languages including Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, Bengali and Simhala also. More than a dozen magazines like Babu, Bujai, Papai, Balavinodini, Balabandhu, Jabilli, Balaprabha, Balamitra, Bomarillu, Pottibava came up at the same time. It is remarkable to note that number after independence has increased to 100. Chinta Dikshitulu, Palanki Ramachandramurthy, Adapa Ramakrishnarao, Kavikondala Venkatarao, Veluru Sivarama Shastri, Rajani, Srivatsava, and Arudra, Vasanta Venkatrao, Mullapudi Venkatramana, and such veteran writers contributed in them many works for children. At the same time, businessmen also started, it's an interesting thing, at the same time, businessmen also started publishing children literature due to the popularity for children magazine. If we look at the subject of songs and lyrics, Venkata Paradashira poets, Chincha Dikshitulu, Rajani Kantarao, and others contributed a beautiful and catchy songs for children to play and sing. At the same time, we can see that beautiful lyrics ballads and scientific lyrical ballads are also coming in, like a Sputnik written by Vasanta Venkatramarao about the moon is one such song. Stories in children literature, story books are more popular than songs, but in the early days most of them were translations. Kasi Madiri Kadalu, Pedarasi Peddamma stories, science stories, Sanskrit stories, Bible stories, Panchatantra stories, and biographies of great men. In the early days, especially in Telangana, Saraswata Parishad, Adarsha Grantha Mandali, Sakala Samiti, Bal Sahitya, and Bala Vijnana Vipanchi, Anna Granthamala, Royal Company in Rayalaseema, Bala Saraswati Book Dip in and Navodaya in Vijayawada, Dachapalli, and Rajamandri published stories for kids. All those stories, songs, and such things existed for children since the early days. Novels and drama came into scene by influence of modern literature. Chinta Dikshit was the first to wrote a children novel in Telugu literature. Later K. Sabha, Narla Chiranjeevi, Palanki, and Ravi Kundalrao and many others narrated it. When it came to drama, mostly drama arrived exclusively to perform in various occasions by children through radio station for children program. K. Sabha, Ilindra Saraswati Devi, Kaundigya, Janavanchi, Edida Kameshwar Rao, Sarada Ashokavardhan, Dr. Amrutalata, Velluri Sivaprasad, Janavanchi, Purnachandra Rao, and Cherkumili Bhaskar Rao. Madira Babla Naik should be mentioned mainly for dramas. Apart from this work to mention, here the Balananda Sangam, which started in 1940, work for children literature and children development are mostly valuable. Radio Akaya, Radio Annaya, Nyayapati Kameswara and Raghava Rao has produced more than 1,000 scripts for radio, for children for radio. All this is the development of children literature, and consequences before independence and later till the Silver Jubilee celebrations, children literature in Telugu become widespread after the 70s. If you look at the children literature writers after 1970, they appears almost equal in both the Telugu states today. The programs conducted by Turaga Janakirani in Akashavani, Rahul Bharadwaja, Jnanpeeth Awardee, Putlapalli Ramarao, Dr. Dasharathi, Jnanpeeth, another Jnanpeeth Awardee, Dr. Srinaran Reddy, Yashoda Reddy, and contributed poetry as well as the simple works for children. In 1979, many children books published. I like to congratulate Professor Devaratu Maharaju, who received Sahitya Akademi Award yesterday. He is a noted writer, rationalist, and children's scientific writer. As a scientist, though he discovered many new spices of crops, he has also penned as many children writings as possible new unique science texts were mainly written for children with an aim of dissipating superstition, Bhujangu, Guruku Eganamam, Chinnodi, Prayanam, etc. are his noted works. And Sahitya Akademi Awardee Reddy Raghavaiah has been writing since science and poetry for children since last 4 decades. Not only Reddy Raghavaiah, Vidushi and Dr. Nanapaneni Mangadevi is famous in children literature as well as in the field of development of children, mental abilities and everything. Here we should say a part of original works. Children literature in Telugu has a good translations since the early days. In the first generation, it came directly from Bengali and English, and from other Indian languages, and then from Soviet Russia, from Vishwakavi Rabindranath Tagore and others also. Why to talk? Deepanvita Rai, who is with me on the same stage, started with recently we published her 7 Stages to Sun and other books also. Besides writing for children, Bhupal is a famous among these pundits over the kids writing. Not only a writer, but is a movie hero too also, and his many poems, stories now translated into other Indian languages also. Tirunagari Vedanta Suri is a well-known children writer, journalist, editor, and designer of many children features in various Telugu magazines. I will conclude. Pendam Jagadishwar is the foremost among those who wrote in Telangana language. He has published many volumes of folk tales like Gajala, Dayam and others. Yeah, I will conclude within 1 or 2 minutes. As far as I am concerned, I have written and edited 22 children books, starting from Pillala Kosam Marakavulu, and recently I published Jeho Bal Sahityam, literary criticism for children in children literature. Not only the efforts of individuals and institutions, but Telugu children literature also become the platform for many new things after the golden jubilee of independence. Many children's literary legends have come. Many of them are still creating for almost 50 years. At this time, we can see scientific children literature with all other topics apart from these various moments or inspirational aspects of lives of Vaithalikulu are seen as stories and books. Not only this, but can also notice that starting from the Central Sahitya Akademi to the state academies, there is a big push. So it is remarkable that in the recent world, Telugu Mahasabalu organized by the government of Telangana, one day was entirely dedicated for children literature. In addition to this, the cultural workshops, Telugu has grown. Every day there are one creating workshop for kid at one or two other place. They are conducted and responded by many government organizations, NGOs. I would like to add one thing also. In 2016, Kendra Sahitya Akademi organized a 3-day workshop in my hometown with about 300 children, and more than 30 children works are still being published in various magazines. That credit goes to Kendra Sahitya Akademi, organized with 300 school children. And Professor Samyukta Das Gupta Garu pointed out one thing about children writings. One more thing should be mentioned here, not just writers like us, but emerging as children writers and writings and publishing books in the last 2 years is a new revolution, called is a new revolution in Telugu children literature. Many organizations, individuals, schools, parents, child development workers, voluntary organizations, literary organizations have contributed to this revolution. It is the courtesy of all of them that more than 400 books written by our Telugu children in 2 Telugu states published in the last 10 years. And one thing I would like to add, one 7th class children, he wrote a story during the Sahitya Akademi workshop in 1916. Right now, his story is a text for second language in Maharashtra Telugu textbooks. So, this is just a bird's eye view of what has happened and happening in Telugu and Telugu children's literature in the last 200 years, although there are some shortcomings due to time and everything. Children literary works and etc. I have mentioned positive outlooks only. Once again, I am grateful to President and Vice President, Secretary and members of the committee of the Sahitya Akademi for invite to this conference, and to you all paid here my accounting. Jai Ho Bal Sahitya. Namaskaram.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohanji, and now may I request all the 3 speakers, Dipanvita Rai, Madhurima ji and Mohanji, to sit before the dais. And I request our other panelists, Dr. Devik Ramesh, Yallappa K.K. Pura, Swati Raje and Virendra Mohanty ji to come on the dais. And now may I request Dr. Devik Ramesh ji, who is a prolific and an eminent Indian poet who writes in Hindi. He is an author of more than 80 books. His major works includes 10 books of poetry and 6 books of research and essays, a book of memoirs which includes many articles related to Korea, 45 books of children's literature and 7 books of translations. Several national and international awards are to his credit. Few among them are Sahitya Akademi Bal Sahitya Puraskar, highest award for children's literature of Uttar Pradesh Hindi Sansthan, Bal Sahitya Bharati Samman of Uttar Pradesh Hindi Sansthan, and Soviet Land Nehru Award on Poetry and Lifetime Achievement Award 2021 by 7th Global Literary Festival and Asian Academy of Arts, Noida. Dr. Devik Ramesh.
अध्यक्ष महोदय, मंच पर उपस्थित मेरे मित्र साथीगण, साहित्य अकेडमी के अध्यक्ष माधव कौशिक जी, सचिव डॉक्टर श्रीनिवास राव जी, यहाँ के रीजनल सेक्रेटरी देवेश जी, अच्छा लग रहा है बुद्धिनाथ मिश्र भी आ गए हैं यहाँ, आने से पहले मैंने कहा था, और आप सब बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण चर्चाएं हुई हैं और अभी अभी जो अन्य भारतीय भाषाओं में जो बाल साहित्य लिखा जा रहा है उसका परिदृश्य सामने आया। हिंदी का भी बहुत विपुल भंडार है, तो यहाँ मैं सबके नाम नहीं गिना सकता, ये तो फिर वो एक सूची सी बन जाएगी। खास तौर पर जो प्रवृत्ति परक ट्रेंड्स को लेकर के जो थोड़े बदलाव आए हैं उनकी तरफ मैं ध्यान दिलाना चाहूँगा। यही पेपर है, लेकिन कोशिश करता हूँ कि कम समय में अपनी बात कहता चला जाऊं। ये तो कोई नहीं जानता कि मौखिक परंपरा, जो कि विशेष रूप से कमोबेश सभी भाषाओं के बाल साहित्य का उद्गम स्रोत है, वो कब शुरू हुआ, कैसे शुरू हुआ, इसका कोई इतिहास नहीं मिलता। लगता है शुरू से ही हुआ। ना उनके निर्माताओं के बारे में हमें कुछ पता है, लेकिन एक बात तय है भारत के संदर्भ में, और ये अब शोधकर्ताओं ने सिद्ध भी कर दिया है कि चाहे वो गीत हो, कहानियां हो, कोई भी रूप हो, जो भी उपलब्ध है, वो इस विविधता से भरे भारत देश में सांस्कृतिक जड़ों की दृष्टि से समान है। मैं यह कहना चाहूंगा कि मैं साहित्य अकेडमी की ओर से ही गया था विदेश में एक बार, तो मुझे एक विषय दिया गया था भारतीय साहित्य में पशु और पक्षी आदि। जब उस पे मैंने एक तरह से शोध किया तमाम भाषाओं में, तो सचमुच में मुझे लगा कि बहुत ही समानताएं हैं, जो जिसकी ओर थोड़ा संकेत माधव कौशिक भी अपने व्याख्यान में दे रहे थे कि हमें विविधताएं लगती हैं, लेकिन अगर उसके मूल में देखेंगे, जड़ में देखेंगे, तो बहुत समानताएं हैं। कुल मिलाकर कहा जाए तो हिंदी का बाल साहित्य लोरी, पालना गीत, प्रभाती, दोहा, गजल, पहेली, कविता, कहानी, उपन्यास, संस्मरण, जीवनी, नाटक आदि अनेक रूपों में उपलब्ध है और आज भी लिखा जा रहा है। कमोबेश लोरियां भी लिखी जा रही हैं। आज का बाल साहित्य कितने ही सार्थक प्रयोगों से भी समृद्ध है। हिंदी के बाल साहित्य और उसमें भी कविता के क्षेत्र में उसकी महत्वपूर्ण उपस्थिति को रेखांकित करते हुए एक समय में प्रतिष्ठित बाल साहित्यकार और नंदन के संपादक स्वर्गीय जयप्रकाश भारती ने उस समय को बाल साहित्य का स्वर्णिम युग कहा था, जिसे बड़े पैमाने पर अब स्वीकार कर लिया गया है। तो सच यह भी है कि हिंदी के बाल साहित्य के सही मूल्यांकन और उसके सही रेखांकन का भी अभाव है। जानकारियां हैं, कुछ हद तक इतिहास और शोध कार्य भी उपलब्ध हो चुके हैं, कुछ हो रहे हैं। क्या मुझे कहने दीजिए, क्योंकि मैं अध्यापन से जुड़ा हूं और हम लोगों को थोड़ा रिसर्च करवाना ही पड़ता है और परीक्षक भी होके जाना पड़ता है। उस दृष्टि से देखा जाए तो अभी बाल साहित्य क्षेत्र में जो शोध हो रहे हैं उनका स्तर उतना ऊंचा नहीं है जितना होना चाहिए। हिंदी की बात कर रहा हूं, और भाषाओं में कैसा हो रहा है मैं नहीं जानता। तो समीक्षात्मक और आलोचनात्मक जो परिदृश्य है उसमें भी अभी बहुत काम करने की आवश्यकता है। हिंदी के संदर्भ में मैं कह रहा हूं, फिलहाल किसी सुदृढ़ सुचिंतित सौंदर्य शास्त्र और सम्यक या संतुलित दृष्टि के अभाव में आज की तथाकथित उपलब्ध आलोचना प्राय आलोचनाओं की पसंद या नापसंद तो है, लेकिन सही माने में इसको मूल्यांकन कहा जाता है वो अभी कम हो रहा है लेकिन कम हो रहा है। हाँ, आज बाल साहित्य के लोगों और संस्थाओं का ध्यान जरूर जाने लगा है। बावजूद अनेक चुनौतियों के विश्व हिंदी सम्मेलन में हिंदी का बाल साहित्य अब चर्चा का विषय मान लिया गया है। तो विश्व हिंदी सम्मेलन होते हैं भारत सरकार की ओर से और दूसरे देशों में मिलकर के, वहां पर अब एक सत्र जो है बाल साहित्य का भी होने लगा है। ये बात अलग है, थोड़ा मैं भी जुड़ा रहा हूं कि अभी वहां भी और सत्रों की अपेक्षा थोड़ा उसे कम महत्व दिया जाता है। तो मैं एक कमेटी में हूँ भारत सरकार की विदेश मंत्रालय की, तो मुझे विदेश मंत्री से कहना पड़ा था कि कृपया करके इसमें भी 2-3 मंत्री जोड़ दीजिए और सत्रों में मंत्री को जरूर बैठा दिया कीजिए ताकि लोग तो आए, और सत्रों में इसी वजह से लोग ज्यादा आते थे, बाल साहित्य में थोड़े कम आए। विदेश मंत्रालय की पहल पर राष्ट्रीय बाल अधिकार संरक्षण आयोग भारत सरकार ने भी बाल साहित्य का प्रवृत्तिपरक इतिहास लिखवाने, राष्ट्रीय अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संगोष्ठी आयोजित कराने, बाल साहित्य का हर पत्र पत्रिका में स्थान निर्धारित कराने और उसका वार्षिक आकलन कराने के कामों में संलग्न है। ये विशेष रूप से काम सौंपा गया है। बड़ी चुनौती है वहां पर भी, मैं सदस्य होने के नाते जानता हूं। एक अखबार वाले ने कहा कि हम क्यों छापे बाल साहित्य, वहां संपादक को बुलाया गया था, क्योंकि हमें तो सीधी सी बात है कि अभी किसी ने बाजारवाद की बात की थी यहाँ पर कि उससे हमें लाभ होगा तो हम करेंगे, नहीं तो नहीं करते, क्यों छापेंगे। तो इस तरह के चुनौतियां हैं सामने, लेकिन कोशिश की जा रही है। राजस्थान में बाल साहित्य अकादमी का गठन एक सुखद सूचना है। कम से कम बहुत दिनों से ये प्रयत्न चल रहा था कि हिंदी को लेकर के जो हिंदी प्रदेश है कम से कम वो बाल साहित्य का अकेडमी बनाए, तो राजस्थान में ये सूचना आ गई है। आज हिंदी में बाल साहित्य की पुस्तकें एक बहुत बड़ी संख्या में हर वर्ष छप रही हैं। एनपीटी, प्रकाशन विभाग, साहित्य अकेडमी सहित बहुत सारे प्राइवेट प्रकाशक भी छाप रहे हैं, और अंदरूनी खबर यह है कि उनसे मुनाफा भी काफी हो रहा है। अंदरूनी इसलिए कह रहा हूँ कि भारी तौर पे कहोगे तो फिर रॉयल्टी भी चाहिए ना लेखकों को। वो तो साहित्य अकेडमी देती है या एनपीटी देती है, प्रकाशन विभाग देता है, मुश्किल ये है। अब मेरा सौभाग्य है कि मैं हिंदी के बड़े से बड़े पब्लिशर ने मुझे छापा है, और ये सरकारी संस्थानों में छापा है, मतलब राजकमल ने भी छापा, वाणी ने भी छापा, भारतीय ज्ञानपीठ ने भी छापा, सब ने छापा है। लेकिन नौकरी करता हूँ इसलिए ठीक है, लेकिन लेख खाली होता तो रोटी मुझे साहित्य अकेडमी से मिलती, एनपीटी से मिलती या प्रकाशन विभाग से मिलती। हिंदी साहित्य भारतीय बाल साहित्य के बाद जब शुरू होती है तो हम पृष्ठभूमि के रूप में संस्कृत और पाली भाषा में लिखे हमारे महान विश्व प्रसिद्ध क्लासिक के प्रति कृतज्ञता जरूर प्रकट करते हैं। नाम लिया जा, हम सब जानते हैं, पंचतंत्र है, तो उपदेश है, कथा सरित सागर है, और जातक कथाएं हैं, महाभारत और रामायण जैसे ग्रंथ भी हैं। देखिए, ये पृष्ठ हिंदी की पृष्ठभूमि में ही नहीं, भारतीय भाषाओं की पृष्ठभूमि में भी ये क्लासिक्स है। जितना ये हिंदी के हैं उतनी अन्य भाषाओं के भी। और आपको मैं बताऊं कि क्या ये सवाल आ रहा था, शायद देवेश ने भी उठाया था, कि वो बीच में संतुलन कैसे किया जाए, क्योंकि हिंदी में भी और भाषाओं में भी होगा। ये विचार है कि हम अपनी संस्कृति की जो धरोहर है उसको क्यों नहीं बाल साहित्य के रूप में पेश करें। हम सब की ट्रेनिंग जो होती है, हमारे दादा सुनाते थे, वो सारा गोरखपुर के जो वो प्रकाशक थे, क्या नाम है, गीता प्रेस, उसी से जो कल्याण आता था, उसी से जो कथाएं आती हैं, उन्हीं को बच्चों के लिए बना करके वो सुनाया करते थे। ध्रुव भक्त वगैरह हमने वहीं से सीखी थी। लेकिन आज ये अगर उस तरफ ध्यान देना चाहिए, रामायण में ही एक कहानी कुत्ते की आती है, ब्राह्मण की और कुत्ते की, और उसमें आप संक्षेप में बता रहा हूं सिर्फ कि वो ब्राह्मण चला जा रहा था, मैं अपने शब्द में सुनाऊंगा, और बाल साहित्यकारों को अपने शब्दों में ही सुनाना चाहिए, अपनी शैली में भी सुनाना चाहिए। पुनर्लेखन होता है, पुनर्रचना होती है, एज इट इज नहीं। अरिस्टोटल ने कभी कहा था कि हिस्ट्री और हिस्ट्री आज साहित्य में अंतर क्या है। हिस्ट्री बताती है क्या हुआ था, और हिस्ट्री पर आधारित साहित्य बताता है क्या हुआ होगा। ये बहुत बड़ा अंतर होता है, इसको हमें, तो वहां पर जो है कुत्ते ने बहुत कोशिश की, लेकिन उसकी छाया जो है वो छू गई ब्राह्मण को। ये मैं रामायण से बता रहा हूं। छूते ही ब्राह्मण ने तो उसकी पिटाई कर दी, तड़ा उसको कुछ अजीब तरह बोला भी। कुत्ते को लगा कि भाई मैंने माफी मांग ली, सब कुछ कर लिया, कोशिश भी की थी, ये जाती हो गई। उसको बड़ा अपमानित महसूस हुआ कुत्ता। वो सीधा चला गया राम के दरबार में। राम अपनी सभा में बैठे हुए थे, वहां द्वारपाल ने उसको रोकने की कोशिश की, कुत्ते को, लेकिन राम को शायद उसकी आवाज सुनाई पड़ गई। उन्होंने कहा आने दो। आ गया, कुत्ते से पूछा कि क्या हुआ। कुत्ते ने सारी बात बता दी कि मेरा कोई दोष नहीं है साहब, दोष इतना जरूर था कि मैंने बचने की कोशिश की, लेकिन फिर भी मेरी छाया उससे छू गई। मैंने क्षमा भी मांगी, कहा भी, लेकिन इन्होंने तो मेरा इतना अपमान किया, पता नहीं, हम अपने शब्दों का, मेरे बाप दादा को भी गाली दे दी, मेरे उसको कर दिया, वगैरह वगैरह। ये उसमें मानी का रामायण में कहानी आप बना सकते हैं। अब सबने कहा, तो ब्राह्मण को बुलाया गया। ब्राह्मण ने कहा ऐसा हुआ है, मैंने पीटा, इसने ऐसा किया, कुत्ते की क्या औकात कि मेरे को छू दे। कोई भी मंत्री, कोई भी सभासद तैयार ही नहीं हुआ कुत्ते के लिए कोई सजा देने को। तो राम ने कहा भी सजा तो, जब दोष है तो सजा तो मिलनी चाहिए। सबने कहा जी ब्राह्मण के लिए कुछ सजा ही नहीं होती है, सजा क्या दें आप। तो कहता है कि अच्छा तो कुत्ते से ही पूछ ले, कोई सजा वो दे दे। तो सब खूब ठाका लगाया, रहा कुत्ता क्या सजा बताएगा। तो कुत्ते से कहा तुम ही सजा बता दो। तो उसने कहा, अपने शब्दों में बता रहा हूं, कि साहब मुझे पता चला है कि फलाने प्रदेश के विश्वविद्यालय में कुलपति का पद जो है खाली है, इस ब्राह्मण को वहां कुलपति बना दो। सबने कहा, देखा, हमने कहा था कुत्ते की क्या समझ, ये सजा दे रहा है कि उसको वरदान दे रहा है। और राम ने कहा ठीक है, और कुत्ता जो है संतुष्ट होकर के चला गया। सब हंस रहे, तो राम ने पूछा, अरे भाई क्यों हंस रहे, तुम कुत्ते की बात समझ सके नहीं? तो अच्छा तो कुत्ते को ही बुलाते हैं। फिर कुत्ते को बुलाया, भाई तुमने कुलपति बनाने की बात क्यों की? सब अनुभव से बता रहा हूं, मैं भी कुलपति था, पर बात बात पे अपने नीचे वाले गुस्सा करता था, किसी को कुछ भी बोल देता था, गाली बक देता था। मेरी वो ऐसी तैसी की, वो हुआ कि अब कुत्ता बना घूम रहा हूँ। अब इसको कुलपति बनने दो, फिर इसका पूछना क्या होगा। आप देखिए, अपने ढंग से आप उन्हीं का कहानियों को अगर बता देंगे तो एक बात, अब एज इट इज जैसे भी है वैसे ही बता देंगे तो फिर वो गड़बड़ है। देखिए, मैं यहाँ अपनी बात आगे बढ़ाने से ब्रेक हो गई। फिलिस्तानी एक कवि ये आया, उसको सुना, उसकी कविता तो याद नहीं है, लेकिन उसका जो जिस्ट है कमाल का था। सुबोध सरकार ने एक बात बड़ी शानदार कही कि कोई भी हो साहित्य, ह्यूमन, देखिए बड़ों का साहित्य हो, बाल साहित्य हो, असली पर्पज क्या है कि जो हम में मनुष्यता है वो बची रहे। अगर कोई साहित्य आपको विद्वान बनाता है और मनुष्यता नहीं बचाता, उसका कोई लाभ नहीं। बने रहिए आप बड़े इंजीनियर, बने रहिए बड़े डॉक्टर, साहित्य ही तो वो चीज है जो विज्ञान को भी जो है ना बताएगा कि नहीं, इस तरह से बम मत गिराना। तो फिलिस्तीनी कवि ने लिखा कि पेड़ ने जो सेब गिराया था वो इंसान की भूख मिटाने के लिए गिराया था। न्यूटन तुम्हारे सिद्धांत के लिए नहीं गिराया था, तुमने उसे सिद्धांत बना लिया, अलग बात है, लेकिन उसका प्राथमिक बुनियादी जो चीज है पेड़ की, वो मनुष्य की भूख मिटाना है। उसके बाद आप उसमें से ग्रेविटेशन और तमाम चीजें निकालते रहिए। ये बात थी। एक छोटी सी बात और बताऊं, बच्चे से पूछा तुम क्या बनना चाहते हो, बच्चे ने ना कहा मैं इंजीनियर बनना चाहता हूं, ना कहा मैं अध्यापक बनना चाहता हूं, ना कहा मैं अफसर बनना चाहता हूं, बच्चे ने कहा मैं मोबाइल बनना चाहता हूं। सब बड़े चौंके हैं कि ये कोई लक्ष्य हुआ। तो उसने कहा कि क्यों मोबाइल, तुम क्यों बनना चाहते हो? हम कहते हैं ना कि आज बच्चा जो टेक्नोलॉजी से मोबाइल पे चिपका रहता है, लेकिन सवाल ये क्यों चिपका रहता है? साइंस तो ये कहती है ना कि क्यों का जवाब दो, वहां ढूंढो ना। तो बच्चे ने ढूंढ लिया जवाब। वो कहते हैं कि देखिए मैं आता हूं, मम्मी मेरी बात सुनो, वो कुछ जिज्ञासा होती है, मम्मी थोड़ी देर रुक, सहेली आ गई, तू जरा खेल, मैं बात करती हूं। मैं पहले ये सब्जी तो बना लूं, तू कहां बीच में आ गया। लेकिन जैसे ही मोबाइल बोलता है, मेरी मम्मी झट उसको उठा देती है। मैं मोबाइल बन जाऊंगा तो मेरी मम्मी इतना ही ध्यान मुझे देगी। ये ह्यूमन है। मोबाइल क्या है, मोबाइल की क्या उपलब्धियां हैं, ये तो टेक्स्ट बुक में आप पढ़ाइए, लेकिन ह्यूमन बनाना क्या है, वो ये होता है। बहरहाल हिंदी बाल साहित्य के प्रारंभ को लेकर थोड़ा विवाद है। बाल साहित्य की परंपरा को खोजते और सामने लाते हुए हिंदी के सुप्रतिष्ठित बाल साहित्यकार और चिंतक निरंकार देव सेवक, स्नेह अग्रवाल, जयप्रकाश भारती के अतिरिक्त उमेश चौहान, दिग्विजय कुमार सहाय आदि ने इस ओर विचार किया है। इन विचारों के अनुसार हिंदी का बाल साहित्य 14वीं-15वीं शताब्दी के आसपास से उपस्थित माना गया है, अर्थात अमीर खुसरो, सूरदास, जगनिक द्वारा लिखित आलाखंड, राजस्थानी कवि जटबल की रचना गोरा बादल आदि से। जहां तक बालक की पहली पुस्तक का प्रश्न है तो गोरा बादल को माना गया है, जिसे एक मुकम्मल बाल काव्य के रूप में स्वीकार किया गया। मिश्र बंधुओं ने पुस्तक में खड़ी बोली का प्राधान्य माना। यदि इस विवाद में न जाएं तो हिंदी के बाल साहित्य का वास्तविक प्रारंभ आधुनिक काल से अर्थात 20वीं सदी के थोड़े आगे पीछे से माना जाता है। सच तो यह है कि भारत की प्रमुख भाषाओं मसलन असमी, बंगाली, मराठी, तमिल, कन्नड़, हिंदी, मलयालम, उड़िया आदि के आधुनिक बाल साहित्य के इतिहास पर नजर डालें तो हम पाएंगे वास्तविक अर्थों में इसका प्रारंभ 19वीं सदी के अंत और 20वीं सदी के प्रारंभ में हुआ था। कुछ अन्य भाषाओं में ये बाद में शुरू हुआ, जैसे मणिपुरी वगैरह में। उदाहरण के लिए एक उत्तर पूर्व भाषा के मणिपुरी में मुद्रित रूप में बाल साहित्य की जरूरत 1940 के दशक से 1950 के दशक के बीच महसूस हुई। शास्त्रीय और पहले के बाल साहित्य की श्रेष्ठ हिस्से के प्रति बिना किसी पूर्वाग्रह के कहा जा सकता है कि स्वतंत्रता के बाद के बाल साहित्य में बच्चों के अनुकूल ऐसा साहित्य लिखा गया है जो पुराने साहित्य की तरह उपदेशात्मक नहीं है। हमारे जो आज वक्तव्य हुए हैं उनमें से भी कई लोगों ने इस तरफ इशारा किया। इसका मतलब यह नहीं है कि बच्चों को शास्त्रीय बाल साहित्य की जानकारी से वंचित रखा जाए। बंगाली में जोगिंद्रनाथ सरकार, ये महत्वपूर्ण बात है, जोगिंद्रनाथ सरकार द्वारा 1891 में लिखित कहानियों की पुस्तक हांसी और खेला ने पहली बार कक्षा परंपरा को तोड़ा और यह बच्चों के लिए पूरी तरह मनोरंजनदायक बनी। सहयोग से कुछ सीख भी लेना एक अतिरिक्त लाभ था। रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर ने इस किताब के बारे में 1893 में साधना में लिखा था, आई कोट, यह पुस्तक छोटे बच्चों के लिए है, बच्चों को ऐसी पुस्तकों की जरूरत है। हमारी सभी बाल पुस्तकें कक्षा में पढ़ाने के लिए होती हैं, उनमें कोमलता या सुंदरता का कोई निशान नहीं होता। और यह वो टिप्पणी है जिससे हिंदी के बाल साहित्यकारों ने भी प्रेरणा ली। मित्रों, देखा जाए तो पंचतंत्र भी पाठ्य पुस्तक है। पंचतंत्र जिस लक्ष्य के लिए लिखी गई थी, पंचतंत्र विष्णु शर्मा ने लिखी थी, वो सिखाने के लिए लिखी थी। और तो टेक्स्ट बुक से शुरू हुआ था, लेकिन अब वो जमाना निकल गया है, हिंदी में कम से कम। यहां पर मैं संक्षेप में बता दूं, दो श्रेणियों में हम देख सकते हैं हिंदी में। एक वो है जो लिखा तो बड़ों के लिए गया है, लेकिन हम उनको बाल साहित्य के रूप में भी पढ़ाते हैं, जैसे प्रेमचंद की कहानी ईदगाह, और भी लोगों की कहानियां पढ़ाते हैं। लेकिन ये इसको मैं गड़बड़ मानता हूं। देखिए, प्रेमचंद की जो शैली अगर आपने सामने पढ़ा भी होगा, वो बहुत सारी भूमिकाएं बनाते हैं जिनकी कोई आवश्यकता बच्चों के लिए नहीं होती है। और दूसरी बात यह कि अब तो ये जानकारी में आ गई कि स्वयं प्रेमचंद ने जंगल की कहानियां के नाम से बच्चों के लिए ही लिखी है। अब उपलब्ध है वो कहानियां, उनको लगे जी। और साथ ही उन्होंने ही हिंदी में पहला बाल उपन्यास दिया, एक कुत्ते की कहानी के रूप में। स्वतंत्रता से पहले हमारी कुछ चीजें ऐसी हैं जो बहुत अच्छी है, जिनसे हम ले सकते हैं, लेकिन स्वतंत्रता के बाद काफी परिवर्तन आया है। मैं ये बात थोड़ा संकेत में दे चुका हूं, और क्योंकि इस बार हमारे देवेंद्र मेवाड़ी जी को पुरस्कार मिला है विज्ञान लेखन के लिए, इसकी बात मैं कहूं। देखिए, मैं अपने शब्दों में बाल उपयोगी और रचनात्मक बाल साहित्य दो में बांटता हूं। बाल उपयोगी साहित्य का महत्व बहुत है। आप जो है बड़े से बड़े छंद में, कवित्व में, किसी में भी किसी साबुन का विज्ञापन देंगे, कोई छंद दोष नहीं होगा उसमें, लेकिन अंततः वो साबुन का विज्ञापन है, क्योंकि साबुन की जानकारी उसमें प्रमुख रूप से है। वो रचनात्मक साहित्य नहीं है, वो उपयोगी साहित्य हो सकता है। जहां जानकारी जो है ऊपर से थोपी हुई नजर आएगी, वो उपयोगी साहित्य हो सकता है, रचनात्मक साहित्य नहीं हो सकता। तो हमारे विज्ञान संबंधी लेखन के सामने ही बड़ी चुनौती है, लेकिन अच्छी बात है, इसमें देवेंद्र भी उसको से जूझ रहे हैं, हमारे जाकिर अली भी जूझ रहे हैं। ये एक दो और मैंने देवेंद्र मेवाड़ी और ओम प्रकाश कश्यप के यहाँ पर उद्धृत किए हैं, ये लेख मैं नहीं यहाँ पर पढ़ रहा हूँ। और इसी प्रकार से अभी समीर गांगुली की किताब आई है, पढ़ने लायक है, कि विज्ञान पर चीजों को बगैर ये लगे कि ये किसी चीज की जानकारी दे रहे हैं, विज्ञान को रोचक बना के कविता में रखना, ये एक लक्ष्य हो सकता है, लेकिन वो कविता है, उसमें से विज्ञान आ जाए, वो दूसरी बात है। ये बड़ा जरूरी है इस फर्क को देखना। और ये जो है समीर गांगुली की किताब पढ़िए, उसमें उदाहरण है, आप उसका नाम है बुलेट और वीर। संजीव जायसवाल का उपन्यास पढ़िए। सुधा भार्गव की मिश्री मौसी का मटका दर पढ़ने को मिली। किससे कहानी की शैली में है, आप इतिहास के पात्र हो, विज्ञान के उपकरणों कुछ भी है, लेकिन इस रूप में दीजिए। एक लाइन में बोलता जाता हूं क्योंकि अध्यक्ष महोदय का कहना कि समय काफी हो रहा है। कल्पना, असल में होता क्या है कि जब हम शुरू करते हैं तब ध्यान नहीं होता है, तब पहला जो वक्ता होता है वो 1.5-2 घंटा बोल जाता है, बाकी के साथ ये दिक्कत होती है, उनको 10 मिनट में खत्म करो, 15 मिनट में खत्म करो। तो अध्यक्ष महोदय से अनुरोध है कि अगली बार जो है ना शुरू में कह दिया कीजिए 15 मिनट, वो पीछा तो नहीं ला सकते आप। कल्पना के बिना कोई साहित्य नहीं हो सकता, लेकिन आज हमारे हिंदी बाल साहित्य में कल्पना विश्वसनीयता को जोड़ दिया गया है। ऐसी पेपर की कल्पना नहीं कि बच्चा पूछे ये क्या है, इसलिए उसमें विश्वसनीयता, उसको लगे हाँ ऐसा भी हो सकता है। ये शैली, ये प्रयोग किए जा रहे हैं हिंदी में। इसी प्रकार से यहाँ बात कही गई, मैं इसको जरूर कहना चाहता हूँ, 2 बातें मैं जरूर कहना चाहता हूँ। एक तो भारत के बालक की जब बात करते हैं तो माफ कीजिए, एक ही महानगर में भारत का बालक बटा हुआ है। जो झुग्गी झोपड़ी से बाई घर में काम करने आती है उसके बच्चे की मानसिकता, और जो खुद संपन्न परिवार से उसके बच्चे की मानसिकता, या तो जंगल में रहने वाला बच्चा, पहाड़ के दूर दराजे में रहने वाला बच्चा। और अभी हमारा बच्चा जो है, हम यहाँ बैठ के कह सकते हैं कि वो बड़ा ही अडल्ट और बड़ा हो गया, लेकिन अभी भी ऐसे बच्चे हैं हमारे देश में जो बेचारा, जिनको पढ़ना भी नसीब नहीं है, स्कूल ही नसीब नहीं है, कैसे। तो हमारा बच्चा जो है धर्म में, आर्थिक दृष्टि से तो नहीं कैसे बटा हुआ है। तो उस बच्चे की अच्छी बात है कि हिंदी में अब साहित्यकार जो है कुछ ऐसे हैं जो अपने अपने खित्ते में जो जा रहे हैं, अपने अनुभव से लिख रहे हैं। यहाँ मैं विषय और अनुभव की बात भी जरूर बताना चाहूंगा कि जैसे बड़ों का साहित्य है, और ये हमारे गोरकी ने भी कहा, हमारे देव सेवक ने, मैं भी मानता हूं, रचना प्रक्रिया के दृष्टि से दोनों में कोई अंतर नहीं होता है, और रचनात्मक साहित्य विषय होता ही नहीं है। मैं अध्यापक होने के लिए बताऊंगा कि ये मौसम पे कविता है, ये इस पे कविता है, कोई नहीं होता। पेड़ पर कविता आप जब कहते हैं तो पेड़ पे कविता होती ही नहीं है। पेड़ को देख करके जो अनुभव लेता है, उसकी जो अनुभूति होती है, उसे कलात्मक अभिव्यक्ति होता है, इसीलिए उसमें मौलिकता होती है। कभी विस्तार से बात करेंगे तो मैं बताऊंगा, मैंने लिखा है, मेरी किताबें भी हैं। तो इसलिए ये अंतर अब हिंदी का बाल साहित्य समझ रहा है कि वो अनुभव के दायरे में जो चीज आती है उसकी कलात्मक अभिव्यक्ति करता है, केवल विषय सोच के तो आपके पास, क्योंकि लय पर इस पे कमाल है तो आप लिखते चले जाइए, और गर्मी आई तो गर्मी आई, भुट्टा लाई, फलाना लाई, लिखते रहिए। लेकिन नए ढंग का कैसे लिखेंगे, ये तो फिर सुबह ये बात अच्छी कही गई कि अनुवाद के बारे में, अनुवाद हो रहा है अब, लेकिन उतना नहीं हो रहा है। मैंने भी कुछ किया है किताब का, जरूर मैं कहूँगा अगर आप पढ़ सके तो, कोरियाई बाल कविताएं एनपीटी से छपी है, ये आप पढ़िएगा, देखिए कोरिया के कवि किस तरह सोच रहे हैं। तो विस्तार होना चाहिए। हमारे वक्त में तो रूसी साहित्य बहुत आता था, पढ़ते थे। हम मैं अंत की ओर जाते हुए केवल हाँ मैं ये बता दूं, पशुओं को, पक्षियों को, जानवरों को पात्र के रूप में हम लाते हैं। यहां पर वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण की जरूरत है। आज हिंदी साहित्य में वैज्ञानिक जो विज्ञान पर विषयों को नहीं भी उठाता, वहां पर भी वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण आ गया है। आज राजा परी वगैरह आएंगे तो वो वैसे ही नहीं आएंगे अपने अंधविश्वासों के साथ, सामंतीय मूल्यों के साथ, नहीं, बिल्कुल अलग हो जाएंगे। और ऐसी चीज लिखी जा रही है। अंत में सिर्फ मैं मैं उसका उल्लेख कर दूं। यहाँ पर मैं देख रहा था, मुझे सौभाग्य मिला साहित्य अकेडमी की ओर से हिंदी की प्रतिनिधि बाल कविताएं इकट्ठा करके छापने का, और उसमें दंग रह गया। मैंने उसमें बहुत सारे पुराने कवियों को छोड़ दिया, नए से नए को लिए, तभी 195 कवि सामने आए, और उनके 700-800 पृष्ठ की वो किताब है। उसको अब 6 भागों में बांट दिया गया। आप देखिएगा उस किताब को, साहित्य अकेडमी ने प्रकाशित किया है। कविताओं का विविध रूप उसमें मिलेंगे। एक वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण से उसका संपादन किया गया है, वैसी रचनाओं का चयन भी किया गया है। उसी से मैं आपको अंत में 2 रचनाएं सुना करके अपनी बात को समाप्त करता हूं। एक गुल्लू का कंप्यूटर। गुल्लू का कंप्यूटर आया, पूरा गांव देख मुस्काया, दादी के चेहरे पर लाली, ले आई पूजा की थाली। गुल्लू सबको बता रहा है, लाइट कनेक्शन सता रहा है। और देखिए, ये भारत के गांव का चित्रण हो रहा है। माउस उठाकर छुटकू भागा, अभी अभी था नींद से जागा, अंकल ने सब तार लगाए, गुल्लू को कुछ समझ ना आए। इन बच्चों को एक तरफ भी ध्यान गया है हमारे यहाँ, सिर्फ संपन्न बच्चों की ओर नहीं। उनको तो पता है माउस क्या है। कंप्यूटर तो हो गया चालू, ना स्क्रीन छुओ मत शालू, जिसे खोजना हो अब तुमको, गूगल में डालो तुम उसको। कक्का कहे चबाकर लैया, मेरी भैंस खोज दो भैया। बड़े जोर का लगा ठहाका, खिसियाए से बैठे काका। वहां का बच्चा जुड़ेगा ना। अभी भारतवर्ष में रह रहे हैं हम, ये हमें याद रखना। और कहां कहां बच्चे हमारे कैसे कैसे, उनको फिर लाइए ना आगे। ये तो पता चल गया बच्चे को, कंप्यूटर से कुछ हमें पता चलता है, लेकिन और भी चीजें। इसी प्रकार से अब त्योहार का नाम आते ही मैं आपसे पूछूं कि त्योहार आप किसको मानते हैं? आप कोई बंगाली के त्योहार बता देंगे, आप हम कोई कहीं बता देंगे, लेकिन जरा याद देखिए, उपहारों की खुशबू लेकर जब तब आ जाते त्योहार, त्योहारों का आना जैसे टप 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 माँ का प्यार। लेकिन सोचा तो यह जाना, सभी मनाते हैं त्योहार, सबको ही प्यारे लगते हैं माँ की गोदी से त्योहार। फसलें खूब लहकती हैं तो, फसलें खूब लहकती हैं तो खेत मनाते हैं त्योहार। जब लग जाते फूल फलों से पेड़ मनाते हैं त्योहार। पानी से भर जाती है तब नदियों का होता त्योहार। ठंडी में जब धूप खिले तो सूरज का होता त्योहार। जिस दिन पेड़ नहीं कटते हैं जंगल का होता त्योहार। और अगर मन अड़िग रहे तो पर्वत का होता त्योहार। अगर हादसा हो ना कोई, सड़क मनाती है त्योहार। बहुत अच्छा। अगर हादसा हो ना कोई, सड़क मनाती है त्योहार। मार काटना चोरी हो तो शहर मनाता है त्योहार। पूरे दिल से खुशी लुटाते कोई हो सब पर त्योहार। खिलखिल हंसते खुशियां लाते लेकिन लगते कम त्योहार। अगर बीज इनके भी होते खूब उगाते हम त्योहार। खुश होकर तब उड़ते जैसे पंछी उड़ते बांध कतार। ये बड़ी विनम्रता से बताना चाहूँ, ये कविता मेरी ही थी जो मैंने सुना दी आपको। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद और क्षमा चाहता हूँ ज़्यादा समय लिया तो, लेकिन
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देविक रमेश जी को। नाउ में आई रिक्वेस्ट डॉक्टर येल्लप्पा के पुरा, who is a senior Kannada writer from Karnataka. He has written more than 140 books till date, which includes more than 7,000 stories with 60 books mainly for children. He is the recipient of Sahitya Sindhu Award, Sahitya Ratna Award, Karnataka Sahitya Akademi Award, and among others. Dr. Yellappa K.K. Pura.
Children literature in Kannada. Today I am feeling tremendously happy to be present here with the blessing of Goddess Kali Mata at this iconic city consisting of marvelous Aura Bridge on the banks of Hooghly River. I am very grateful and thankful to our President and the committee of all members Kendra Sahitya Akademi for giving me this wonderful and beautiful opportunity and emphasizing on the future of the children through various programs like Bal Sahitya and literature crafted specially for children's learning experience. I give my best regards to our very own noble Gnanapita awardee, humble-hearted Dr. Chandrasekhar Kambarji. We often say, Kannada Nadu Sundara Bidu, as said, Karnataka is having a beautiful queen Kannada with art, literature and music culture as mother. And the mother has given birth to 8 Gnanapita nobles who have flourished and glorified the queen even more. Between them, there are writers since 1920 in Kannada like Govinda Pai, Panje Mangesharaya, Dinakara Desai, Na D'Souza, Kuvempu, Bendre, Karant, Rajaratnam, Shishu, Sangamesha, all they have immensely contributed to Bala Sahitya by enriching literary work also for children. But nowadays we only find very few writers contributing to children's literature, as many feel writing books for children is not so important. There are already many other books online and offline. Nowadays children are more into mobile phones, TV, internet, WhatsApp, YouTube, cinema, etc. Even gaming platform like PUBG and other video games have made children to stay away from books and literature. Hectic academic school books have caused them to stay away from literature books. Habit of reading books has begun to slowly vanish. So, keeping all these issues in my mind, I started to explore various options, and from last 42 years I have been working for the progress of children's literature by writing rural area visions and 7,000 small interesting stories only for children, which includes 150 books ever written by an author. Recognizing my effort, I have received several awards and rewards from various institutions and academies. This has encouraged me to work even more hard. Because आज की बच्चे कल की भविष्य, children are the future. Without them, it's impossible to build a strong nation, which can be done only through strong literature containing moral values, inspiring stories of legends of history and ethics will bring out an excellent citizen who will bloom like jasmine and spread the fragrance across the whole globe. To bring this change, we have to draw attention towards children by making them to read literature through social media such as WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, cinema, which will interest them and they will come forward looking for the books themselves. In this regard, Dr. Basu Bevina Gidat, award winner of Bal Sahitya Puraskar for the year 2021, who is present here, is a noted poet and short story writer in Kannada. He has been writing fiction both for children and elders. His short stories and novels for children depict a receptions of rural India. A realistic and humorous narration is one of Dr. Basu Bevina Gidat's highlight. He has drawn inspiration from oral and folk descriptions and mythological legends including Ramayana and Mahabharata. Basu has written New Age stories for children, keeping in view present day depiction. He has also working along with like-minded writers to focus on the importance of children writing. Our children should be made aware about humanity, human values and social well-being through our epics like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, Veda, Upanishads, Puranas, Janapadas, Chandamama, Panchatantra, Bala Prapancha, Balatantra, Balabitra, which will give them disciplined way of life. When we were kids, our grandparents and parents used to tell us stories and sing Janapada songs which were not written in any books. These stories were told during bedtime, during dinner time and the moonlight. Because those days we had no access to cinema, radio, television, mobile and internet, etc. But nowadays things have changed rapidly. Time is moving fast. Even the children have various pressure, opportunities and unhealthy competition. So we have to cope up with the children and make them to realize the present life of the reality and the real world and make them a good Ramarajya citizens. Hope we all work towards achieving this goal. Thanking you all once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. K.K. Puraji. Now may I request Srimati Swati Raje, who is known as an award-winning writer, a newspaper journalist, international resource person on children's literature, and a leading thought leader of the movement of language preservation. Her 8 children books are widely acclaimed with various published editions, and most of them are presented at experimental theatres, at school annual social gatherings as plays and fabulas, and made into a short film. She is the recipient of the Best Children's Literature of the Year Award by the Government of Maharashtra. She has been awarded the Achievement Award for her pioneering and sustained efforts in language preservation by the CEO of Archie Comics in New York. Srimati Swati Raje.
Good evening. We've been listening to various interesting, informative, enriching sessions since yesterday on this esteemed dais of Sahitya Akademi, giving us a wonderful insight into a very important faculty of literature. Children's literature is such a curious case that how much ever we explore it, dive in it, a lot remains to be explored. It enjoys a very special position which no other branch of literature has enjoyed. First of all, it's enjoyed by everyone. irrespective of age, young or old. It has a wide range to encompass, right from lullabies to world classics, and from fairy tales to nonsense poetry, from adventure stories to science fiction. Everyone interested has tried to explore it in his own way, his own perspective. Some of us have seen this through child-centric lens, while others have through literature-centric lens. Some give importance to the written matter, some consider it, the reader's response is integrated to it. Some look at it through feminist angle, some through psychoanalytical angle. So basically it embraces all genres, fantasy epic to humorous jokes, and all forms from grandmother's tales to e-books. So basically it touches so many fields directly and indirectly, right from advertising to printing to films. It is so abstract, so ever-changing, so fluid that it is virtually impossible to understand it as a whole. When I think of children's literature, I always remember the story from Mahanubhav Pantha, the story of an elephant and 7 blind men. Basically children's literature comes to you in that shape as you explore it through your capacity of tools, your strength, resources and insight. From this esteemed dais, I would like to explore Marathi children's literature as I encountered it through the roles I played so far as a writer, as a journalist of a regional newspaper, a curious academic, and as a passionate activist. It's a very heartwarming experience to speak about children's literature in Kolkata, which could aptly, it is called aptly as a cradle of Indian children's literature. We owe a lot to Raja Rammohan Roy's efforts for the language simplification, emergence of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar era, with wonderful initiatives like Peshwa Bali magazine, and the robust generation of writers in Bengal, which directly or indirectly provided impetus to the children's literature movement in the then Maharashtra in Marathi. If you think about the development of Marathi literature in the first quarter of the 19th century, the first children's book that was published in Marathi was ironically the translation of English. Tanjaur's Raje Sarfoji Bhosle got a book written from a person called Sakhan Pandit in 1806, and it was a translation of Isab Niti. It was named Balbodh Muktavali. The print of Balbodh Muktavali is not available now. However, it enjoys a position of being the first printed book in Marathi. So the printing history in Marathi literature started from the children's literature. After that, soon 2 other books followed, Panchatantra and Hitopadesh, and they were translated from Bengali. So in 1822, Mumbai Hind Shikshan Mandal was established for school education, and they started printing curriculum books. And the first one was Sinhasan Battishi and Panchopakhyan, that is Panchatantra. So the dawn of Marathi children's literature was marked by translations either English or Bengali. Hind Shikshan Mandal appointed a person as the administrative manager, and he turned out to be a greatest visionary of Marathi children's literature. He was Mr. Bapuji Chhatre. He actually initiated many translations. Tarachanda Datta's Pleasing Tales was one of them. Because of Bapuji Chhatre's initiative, foundation was established for children's literature in Marathi. When we look back at the history of Marathi children's literature, we can divide the era of 19th century and the early 20th century in 4 distinct divisions. One is Chhatre era, who started this. Secondly, Damle, Oak era, Apte era. All these great men developed Marathi children's literature branch, and it took it to a new height. The biggest contribution of these people were starting of children's magazine movement in Marathi. This was the most significant milestone in Marathi children's literature, which started from the magazine Balbodh. And Balbodh published 400 biographies, 400 essays, and 800 articles for children, and it ran for 34 years. After the success of the first ever magazine, many other magazines started coming up. By the middle of the 20th century, many new magazines were established all over Maharashtra. More and more people started writing for children. Vago Apte's Anand was there, Kara Palwankar's Khelgadi was there. More importantly, Bhara Bhagwat's and Lilavati Bhagwat's Bal Mitra was there. It was this time that a very forceful stream of translation started coming into Marathi. They were not just translations but were transliterations or transcreations. Like for example, Alice in Wonderland, which Dada Bhagwat translated, it gave a complete makeover to English Alice. And it was called Zaichi Naval Kahani, and Zai was completely transformed, Alice was completely transformed to Zai. Rabelais' Gargantua Pentagola became Mayapur se Rangel Rakshas, and Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn became Bhatak Bahadur. Along with the Victorian era English classics, we started getting some translations of American writers too. For example, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House in Big Woods came as a Mothya Ranatla Chota Ghar. It opened up a new world of a little girl in prairies in front of us. It was just before the television revolution, and we could see and we could peep into the outside world through these translated lenses. 1960s and 70s, Marathi children's literature saw the pinnacle. Many magazines started coming in. Balodyan, Mulansa Masik, Kumar, Kishore, to name a few. Innumerable Marathi children like me were happy reading these genre and content-rich Marathi books and magazines like Chanda Mama, Kumar, Kishore, and many more. Many Diwali issues exclusively for children started getting published. Many established writers started writing for children. Durga Bhagwat, Shanta Sherke, Viva Shirvadkar. Some of them were Sahitya Akademi award winners, some of them were Jnanpith award winners. Sudhakar Prabhu, Shailaja Raje, Raja Mangal Vedekar. They tried their hands at various genres. Fairy tales and mythologies, Jatakas and Rupak Kathas were retold. Biographies and plays were written, especially for children. Poetry of master poets like Indira Santa, Jnanpith award winner Vinda Karandikar, Kusumagraj, and Mangesh Padgavkar gave a wonderful rhythm to our childhood. Adaptations, translations reached new heights. Enid Blyton stories were presented in various Desi Marathmula forms. Something as tender as Little Women captured our teenage hearts, and the Yearling by Marjorie Kidan Rawlings too. The world was beautiful in 70s and early 80s. It was the golden age in for Marathi literature. Emergence of Nabhovani radio played a very important role meanwhile in wider circulation of literature through Nabhonatya and various programs based on literature. Radio carried literature to urban as well as a rural Maharashtra children. Sai Paranspe and Ratnakar Matkari were the stalwarts in this. Meanwhile, a veteran leader and a very popular idealist children's writer, Sane Guruji, had cherished a dream of Antarbharti. In this conducive environment, we were getting indications of children's literature going to the pinnacle, and suddenly everything started collapsing, rather changing in 80s. Patchad shuru ho gayi. It was then that we needed to hold on to our soil, but we failed to do so. In mid-80s, television came and got itself established at every Marathi household. With vibrant and aesthetically rich programs of Mumbai Doordarshan, every Marathi household started watching it. I had started working as a journalist then in one of the prominent Marathi dailies of Maharashtra. I was handling Sunday edition and feature desk of that newspaper. For a while, newspaper supplements proved to be a good source of regional literature for the younger audience, though for their own marketing needs. Magazines were slightly overshadowed by this robust newspaper supplements. With the increasing threat of TV in newspapers, they tried to capture younger audience for the ensured future readership. We started giving more space to the children's content, making it as interesting, as colorful as possible. Working in Mumbai for 2 years, I realized that urban children have already gone away from letters. That was in mid-90s. And while working in rural areas like Western Maharashtra and Northern Maharashtra for 2 years, by 1999, I realized that they were also on the same verge. On the verge of millennium, private 24/7 channels, mushrooming of English medium schools, and computers had captured our young readership as a Pied Piper, leading them slowly to the grip of mobiles. So where was our capable writing generation then? When Harry Potter mania was creating 2 miles queues for the first copy of at the bookstores, we could not get good regional writers. The previous generation who had brought children literature to pinnacle and glory, their efforts and passion they had retired now. We could not generate a new generation of regional writers by basically to fill this void. those knew that they had a good skill of writing, they had turned to Mayanagri, Mumbai to write for various channels. I'm also one of the culprits who spent 5 years of my creative life writing 2 daily soaps in an attempt to try a new medium. Our regional writers learned Hindi, they learned new techniques of screenplays and dialogues, but writing for children, and that too in their mother tongue, was a difficult task for them. Thus, English medium schools' impact of audiovisual media, depleting quality of good indigenous literature and availability of very good quality children's literature from the world by the Scholastic and all those publication houses that started coming into India. This made a long-lasting dent on our regional literature. There were some stars shining brightly though, like Madhuri Purandare, Dilip Prabhavalkar, and a few publishing houses like Jyotsna, Rohan, Rajhouse, Gamabhana, Manovikas. They had done some experiments, but the loss was inevitable. This plight of children's literature, which I saw as a journalist, brought me to the arena of academics. I started doing MPhil in children's literature, and one more thing hit me, that there was the dearth of good reference material on children's literature. The faculty of criticism was not developed. It was pre-internet era, and I had good 2 reference books in Marathi to depend on for my MPhil thesis, which I could use as a reference material. One was written in 65-66 by Maltibai Dandekar, and the other one was more recent in 96-97 by Lilavati Bhagwat. I had yet to hear about Kimberly Reynolds and Peter Hunt and all those people, because till then I had not started going out as a resource person on children's literature. Generally, research scenario was on a poor stage too. In Pune University, only one PhD was done on children's literature in all those glorious 50 years of university, and mine was the first one in SNDT, and this was the case on the verge of millennium. The picture is slightly changing now, and that's the silver lining. So we had lost the bus by the first decade of the millennium. On the personal level, I started working on it, leaving all the glamour field of Mumbai Bollywood, of screenplays and dialogue writing, while 2 films in hand. I left it there and then, and I started my own organization, Bhasha, for the preservation of regional languages, realizing that if you don't create love for language in the younger generation, the rich fabric of our languages would be lost. So last 15 years, we are working relentlessly to bring children and letters in our mother tongue together to create regional language literacy through various community-oriented programs like establishing community libraries, teacher training programs, organizing multilingual film festivals. We organize one of the biggest story festivals called Katha Yatra to bring back the glory of stories to young and adults. And of course, we organize literature-based conferences along with Sahitya Akademi and National Book Trust. This overall activism of all passionately working people in the field of language and literature perpetuation was thwarted by COVID in last couple of years. Generally, the Grantha Vyavahar got a backseat. However, a few Shiledars are holding a fort with new experiments, new modes of to reach readers. I would like to mention some efforts quickly. Pratham Books has been at the forefront for last many years in publishing, as you all know, quality regional literature. They are getting good content from books outside India also, and recently they have developed 30 beautiful books for early readers during COVID time. Madhuri Purandare is working on this project. During COVID time, Pratham and some other organizations like Kishore, they started initiatives like Goshti Shanivar to reach out digitally to children who cannot attend schools. Pratham has Story Weaver, their platform, that's a popular concept now. Jyotsna and Rohan, these publication houses are coming up with new themes appealing to the young readers. They published both together they published my 8 books with a local content and global spirit. We call them fondly picture books for 8 to 80. Manovikas is coming up with a science-based series in association with Marathi Vidyan Parishad. Rohan is coming up with interesting Marathi detective stories. They have translated Feluda earlier in Marathi, and now these detective stories are coming up with a girl protagonist. So we are initially we were speaking about a children's magazine movement. I must mention that Kishore, the magazine started by Maharashtra government in 70s, has developed generation of readers and writers. My generation was nourished on it. It is the only children's magazine which is running for last 51 years, and with a good quality content. They give it only for 7 rupees. It is a wonderful example of government's initiative to bring children and regional content together. In Maharashtra, there is a tradition of Diwali issues, just like Puja issues here. Many youngsters are coming ahead to publish Diwali issues dedicated to children's literature in Marathi, and that is again a silver lining. I'll just mention Sadhana. Sadhana is also coming up with a magazine. Great. Okay, illustrations. Yes, we realize that the illustrations have to be good to to circulate a good content. So many people from Maharashtra are associated with the Riyaz initiative. So far, I've explored this abstract concept of children's literature historiographically through an academic perspective, through the challenges faced as a working journalist. I presented my case as an activist who tried and still trying to tackle these challenges in my own way. Now I will just raise some issues lastly for the regional language writers as a children's writer. So illustrators will design the books with a global skill like Shauntan, and they may raise to Shauntan or Roger Mello. Publisher will put a lot of efforts to bring out a world-class production marketing marketing agencies will do their best to take them to various places, and government institutions will help the spread. But is that enough? Are we writers ready to create world-class content? Are you, with this multilingual country with so many cultures and subcultures residing for centuries together, again with such a vibrant oral tradition, are we been able to produce a generation of robust regional writers to face the global audience? Globalization has stopped threatening us. We already are converted now. I would just like to ask ourselves, are we ready to be really local writers? And for this, are we regional writers ready to introspect, study, alter ourselves and grow? Grow as a robust generation of writers. Do we take this challenge seriously is a question. Are we ready to find our soul, own soul, that is being lost under the burden of yet existing psychological linguistic colonialism and now the pressure of glorious international market forces? I would like to take help of Hemingway's quote to conclude. He says, there is nothing to writing, all you do is sit at a typewriter and read. My question to my regional language writer fraternity is, are you ready to bleed? I promise everything is not lost as yet.
Thank you very much, Swati Rajaji. Now may I request Sri Virendra Mohanty ji. He has published more than 24 books to his credit, and he is the recipient of Odisha Sahitya Akademi Award, National Literacy Mission Award, Sishu Sarathi Samman, Sahitya Akademi Bal Sahitya Puraskar, among others. Sri Virendra Mohanty ji.
Respected Madam, Chairperson of this seminar, and respected our popular Vice President of the Sahitya Akademi, and and eminent writer Dr. Madhav Koshudi and respected dynamic secretary of the Sahitya Akademi and eminent writer Dr. K. Srinivasa Rao ji and respected secretary, regional secretary and my friend Dr. Mihir Sahu and all the coordinators of the Sahitya Akademi. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the honorary guests both on and off the dais and my dear friends. My heartiest regards to Central Sahitya Akademi for giving me an opportunity to brief the august audience about the rich Odia children's literature. Every language is based on the foundation of its folk literature. Children's literature is one of the most important part of every language. Previously, the said subject was in the circumference of literature study, but now with the passage of time, it has taken the center stage and hence included in today's educational curriculum. Since ancient ages, Odia children's literature has been rainbowed with colors of stories, poems, novels, dramas, essays, biographies, riddles, etc. Instead of regular literature, children's literature can grow and give most of our history to kids if depicted with stories involving attractive, colorful pictures in newspapers, periodicals, etc. Ancient Odia children's literature has been progressively marching soldier to soldier with all other similar literatures in India, with the aim of delivering its core to the foundation to today's human civilization. The Odia literature, inner soul and other outer body can be expressed in the most beautiful and colorful storytelling way in this contemporary age. This literature has been enriched by many great writers throughout the history like Sri Madhusudan Rao, Fakir Mohan Senapati, Nand Kishore Bala, Nilakanta Das, Godavarisa Mishra, Godavarisa Mahapatra and many uncounted others, especially the Varna Bodho, Varna Parichaya, meaning initial learning of Odia language letters. This is written by great poet Sri Madhusudan Rao. By this, he introduced Odia children's literature to the new age of visualization. After independence, many authors and poets enriched the children's literature during the cycle of time till today. Some of the great names are Jatiya Kavi Birokishore Das, Sri Ramakrishna Nanda, Pandit Upendra Tripathi, Sri Udayanath Sarangi, Sri Binod Kanungo, Sri Ram Prasad Mahanti, Dr. Manoj Das, Dr. Jagannath Mahanti, Dr. Maheshwar Mahanti, Sri Ramakrishna Patnaik, Sri Birendra Kumar Samantray, Sri Nadia Behari Mahanti, Sri Birokishore Padhi, Sri Nandkishore Singh, Sri Bhatkrishna Ojha, Sri Khirod Pothal, Dr. Digaraj Brahma and Dr. Ramesh Patri. In this age of science and technology, Odia children's literature have immensely developed and become people's friendly by passing through various experiments done by Sri Das Benhur, Dr. Manindra Mahanti, Dr. Digaraj Brahma, Dr. Narendra Prasad Das, Dr. Ramesh Patri, Sri Birendra Mahanti, Dr. Prithibas Naik, Dr. Basant Kishore Sahu, Dr. Sharad Biswal, Dr. Lakshmikant Khuntia, Dr. Jyotirmay Mahanti and Dr. Sunamani Rautu. As mentioned earlier, Odia children's literature is expressed in various forms, but during the present line, more importance has been given to poems. In this context, the Odia children's poems are more expressively than any other literature of our Indian demography. These songs are derived from ancient folk songs. These are known as Lori rhymes. These are sung by grandmothers, mothers, etc. since age to pacify nursery kids from time to time in various forms. that are different as per time, place and person. These rhymes are addressed as Nana Maya Gita. When baby is crying, his or her mother sing a song. Dhore baiya dho ଯେଉଁ କି ଆରିରେ ଗହଳ ମାଣ୍ଡିଆ ସେଇ କି ଆରିରେ ଶୋ ବାଇ ଚଢ଼େଇରେ ବାଇ ଚଢ଼େଇ ତୋ ମା ଯାଇଛି ଗାଈ ଚରେଇ ବଣରୁ ଆଣିବ ପାଚିଲା ବେଲ ଖୁଆଇ ପିଆଇ କରିବ ଗେଲ. Similarly, it's called Lori in Hindi, Chele Bhuleno Chora in Bengali, Nichukani song in Assami, and Lali Potalu, Jola Potalu in Telugu. Many rhymes written by eminent writers like Das Benhur, Kuna by Onamana Gita. Nowadays, Das Benhur rhymes depicting the love and grandfather for his grandsons and daughters. Badi thuku thuku pakua pati chali thiri thiri mothare chuti deho soro soro telo घरटा जाकर मुरेबी सिएरे छातीरे छातीए गेलो. And like this, Sri Birendra Mahanti Jhumur Jhai depicting a small girl child demanding a sound making toy. Jhumru Jhai Jhumuri Rusuchi Jhumuka Pai किए आनीदेव कहरे झुमुरु झुमुरु झुमुका बजाई झुमुरी नाचिब पहरे. The children's poems are written in such a manner that it will sensitize kids from tender age towards nature, population, moral education, road safety, science and technology etc. to make them aware of social, environmental and national consciousness. One of the poem by Sri Birendra Mahanti addressing road safety is as follows. Sadakare sadaka to dehare niti dina badhilani dhadaka muhamuhi janore to deho bhari gahali suraksha saptah pai bajauchu kahari niyam palana pai jagi uthu pulaka sadakare sadaka. Another poem on environmental awareness written by Sri Umakant Mahanti is बापा शुणिथिले तांको बापा ठारू कहूथिले मते निजे जहा कर पछे गछ हाणी बुनी गछरे ठाकुर बीजे. Also a poem giving awareness about the science behind the different skin color of human race by Dr. Vijaya Patra. मଣିଷ देहे वर्ण कणिका रहिछि लुचि पड़ा जादेहे सिए जेतिकी उणा तादेहे सेते गोरा. Similarly, poem written by Sri Bhattakrishna Swami regarding recycling of water. माटी तले थाए आकाश को जाए लोटे आसी पुणी धरारे पवन रे मिसी ऊपर को उठे ताती गले टाण खरारे. Likewise, poem of afforestation by Birendra Mahanti. सरस जीवन जापन पाइकी लोड़ा सुस्थ परिवेश सबुज बलय सृष्टि करने वृद्धि कर गछ वंश वृद्धि कर गछ वंश. Like children's poem stories on children's are also written in Odia. In this pair eminent names are as follows: Dr. Ramesh Patri, Dr. Das Benhur, Sri Ramchandra Naik, Sri Banshidhar Kuntia, Sri Pritibas Naik, Sri Birendra Kumar Samantarayan, Sri